Hi, hello everyone. My name is Alice Letsoalo. You're listening to In the Spotlight on Radio Veritas on 576 AM and channel 870 on DSTV. You were just listening to Bube Guhle by Hle. I recently discovered this one, so I hope that you enjoyed it just as much as I did. In the Spotlight is a show that puts Catholics who are doing amazing, incredible things in the world, and we're going to be putting them in the spotlight. So I'm sure you've been enjoying us as we've been taking you through this holiday season, having amazing conversations with our guests about their lives, their careers, and of course, um, as in their lives as Catholics as well. So I think it's been such an amazing one indeed, with my co-presenters as well taking over the other shows. So also, Happy New Year. It literally feels like we just started 2022. So it's a bit of a scary one walking into the new year, but I'm sure it's going to be such a blessed one because I personally have a good feeling and I'm sending all of the good and the positive vibes to everyone. And so in honor of that, and I was just saying, you know what, have a blessed and a beautiful year. I'm going to be giving you random facts about your New Year's resolutions. So I hear that 4,000 years ago, the Babylonians were the ones that were trying to be better people in the new year. And the deeply religious resolutions, they made them during a celebration called Akitu. And this is the time during which they would make a recommitment to God. Then this tradition was carried on by the Romans, who apparently they're the one who invented the year, or the month rather, of January. And then I'm also told that the most common New Year's resolution is, yes, you guessed it, exercise. I'm sure everyone makes that resolution at the beginning of the year. And I am hoping, because I'm also one of the guilty culprits, so I'm hoping I'm going to be a lot more consistent this year. But then sadly is that we have 22% of people, they fail after just 1 week of making the New Year's resolutions. And then 40% of people will fail after 1 month, and then 60 will fail after 3 months. So we must pray for that strength, so that if we are committing to something, that we do carry on with it throughout the year. And then for the last one is a good tip. So they say that to make sure that your resolution does last throughout the year, a good way for you to ensure that that does happen, that in the new year, or the following year, that you have kept true to your promise, that you tell someone about it. So if you vocalize it, then hopefully someone is going to be holding you accountable, right? So such a beautiful one there. Interesting random facts about your New Year's resolutions. I hope it's going to be an incredible and a blessed one indeed. So not forgetting, of course, to continue to ask God for his guidance and to pray about whatever it is that you're going to be putting down. With that said, I'm just going to ask us to have a cute listen to Ngilawule by Benjamin Dube featuring Goli Mkwango and Unati Mzekele. Please do enjoy. Asking God to guide every step that we are making. Super excited about this one. We do have our lovely guest this afternoon, and it is Professor Terry Sacco. So I'm going to be reading her beautiful profile, and really we're just going to be scratching the surface here. She's done such an incredible things with her life. So she is currently the academic dean and the acting president of St. Augustine. She dedicated her life to her involvement in the oppressed and those who have been disenfranchised. So she started all of her works at the tender age of 14 years old. So she began her journey by doing weekly visits to a community in the KZN area. And this community was under threat of forced removal under the Group Areas Act. And the visits were an outreach to show solidarity and support. These visits continued until the end of her matric year, where she moved to Durban to study. She later qualified as a social worker at the Howard College, University of KZN, where her first job was at the Philomena's Home for Girls, which was established and run by the Augustinian sisters. She then worked in the Center for Social Department at Wits University while studying towards an honors degree, for which she was awarded the Michael O'Dowd Gold Medal for Excellence in the School for Social Work Practice.
So her work with children and her fearless ventures into tough areas feared by most South Africans earned her the attention of the security police, and she was later detained without trial under the severe Section 29 of the security laws, which in terms of which she was held in solitary confinement and interrogated for hours each day. But despite her incarceration, she still became more militant by continuing with her work of supporting families of political detainees, counseling detainees on their release, activism, targeting the detention of children, amongst many others. So her permanent involvement as a Wits academic in these acts of resistance to oppression was the reason that the Wits University Department of Social Work was not expelled from the International Association of Social Workers during the years of South Africa's isolation via academic boycotts. With Dr. David Webster, she was an integral part of the tea parties of the DPSC, which is the Detainee Parent Support Committee. So they were designated as tea parties to bypass the ban on assembling in groups. So after obtaining her master's degree in education, it took her in a different direction, where she became interested in social work and she started writing papers in this field. She eventually left Wits to pursue a PhD in reconciliation and social work at St. Augustine College. And from this time and for 14 years, she journeyed into Soweto with Bishop Paul Varren weekly to be a part of group discussions at a refugee for children refugees. So she applied for funding to launch and fund activities of the South African chapter of the leadership program called the Mentoring and Empowering Program for Young Women. So then with the sudden departure of the St. Augustine CEO, she then stepped into her role as the academic dean and acting president. As I said, we're literally just barely scratching the surface with all of the amazing works that she has done with her lives. I always wonder when you have such a beautiful and colorful profile, how you feel. Prof. Terry, how are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Alice. I'm well and I'm happy to be here. And it's so wonderful to be in conversation with a vibrant young woman who is committed to her work, so committed that she takes time out of a holiday in order to engage in her work. So I'm happy to be here. And thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. So, Prof. Terry, I want us to play a bit of a game of this or that, just to get you a bit warmed up before we do get into our interview. So I'm going to be giving you two options, and then you have to basically pick your preference. So I hope you got the rules of the game.
I did, yes.
Okay. So would you rather be embarrassed or be afraid?
Oh, it's a hard. I'm embarrassed.
Okay. Summer or winter?
Summer.
Would you rather have the ability to be invisible or the ability to read minds?
Read minds.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Okay. Would you rather pause time or rewind time?
Rewind time.
Lovely. Yeah, I think a lot of us would have picked that one. I certainly would have. So thank you so much for that, Prof. Terry. So I'm going to get straight into it. How did you become Catholic?
I was baptized. I belong to a Catholic family. My father's family, we trace back our Catholic roots for 400 years.
Wow.
And so I'm Catholic both vertically and horizontally. I've been a Catholic all my life, and my parents had a big Catholic family. That's how I became Catholic. I became Catholic because I was born into this community.
That's beautiful. So is that how you also, because I understand that you went to St. Catherine's convent in Mpangeni. So is that how you eventually ended up in that convent?
Yeah, so I was born in Johannesburg and I went to the Assumption Convent in Maryvale, yeah, in Joburg. And then when my father and mother moved to KwaZulu-Natal, I went to St. Catherine's Convent in Impangeni.
Lovely. So would you say that when you joined that school, that's when you were sort of inspired to start all of these works, really, by aiding those who are oppressed and disenfranchised?
So I really feel that some of the sisters, the Dominican sisters, were very influential in my life. A lot of the Dominican schools have a social justice orientation, and I feel very blessed that Sister Justina saw something in me that was worthy and worthwhile. And so, although I was 14, she put me in touch with Father Elmar, who was the priest that visited Felixton, a couple of kilometers from Impangeni, and those families came from India as indentured labor to work on the sugarcane farms, and then they'd been there for half a century, and they were told that because of the Group Areas Act under apartheid, that they would be moved south of the Tugela. So there was a lot of insecurity, and I walked the streets of Felixton with Father Elmar, and we visited people and spoke to people and were a presence there.
I think that's so beautiful, that you were even able to get involved at such a young age. And I'm assuming doing all of this also would have been against the laws at the time, aiding those. Where do you think you got all of the courage to continue to do that? And we're going to get a little bit into some of the works that you've done also later on in your life. But where do you think, you were getting all of this courage to be able to stand against the current and to just say, well, I'm still going to be assisting these people, even though I might be shunned upon or face serious consequences as a result of my actions?
I don't think that was foremost in my mind. I felt safe with Father Elmar, and I felt safe with the sisters, the Dominican sisters. So it was, apartheid only became much more clear to me as I grew older, around the violence of it. So when I was young like that, I knew that people were insecure and there were those laws, but they were too complicated for me to really get my head around as a 14-year-old. But I trusted the adults around me, and I loved being with Father Elmar, and I loved being with Sister Justina and Sister Jean-Marie, and so these women were very powerful and loving women. So I felt safe. It didn't feel like I didn't take any courage of me, because I had a chance to live well, to live doing good things, and I loved my church, and I loved the people, and I loved being with the priest and doing the things that we did. Yeah, so I didn't feel it required courage. No.
No, totally understood. I want us to take a bit of a break and listen to what has been your picks for the show this afternoon. So the first one was Sweet Freedom by Jennifer Ferguson, and then the second one was Jerusalem. Can you just tell me a little bit about why you chose those two songs? What do they signify to you? What do they mean to you?
So Jennifer Ferguson was an activist singer. She was involved in the arts, and she did a lot of shows that were very contemporary and that were challenging of apartheid during the 80s. And she created and composed many songs that captured the heartache of the people that were not seen. And so Sweet Freedom is very meaningful because it actually foregrounds the lives of the women who were left back in the townships while their husbands were taken to Robben Island. So Irene Mkwai fell in love with Mkwai, and it's her story about having to go to visit him and take the boat from Cape Town to Robben Island. And it's a story about the millions of children and women that are not named in the history of our struggle, of our people. So for that, I mean, she sings beautifully. She captures the soulful thing of women and of children and of not being seen, and yet live with such suffering and courage. So that's very meaningful to me. It captures a time when we were in the struggle together in the 80s, and brought beauty to that. So now Jerusalem is a very different experience for me. I love that, because we fought hard and long, and we didn't think that apartheid would end when it did. So it was a miraculous time. And when I hear Jerusalem, it captures everything we fought for. It captured the beauty of the African voice, of the African gift to the world. Like the whole world actually ignited around the song and the dance of Jerusalem. And that's what South Africans can give to the world. And that was my hope. And that was the desire that we had, that we've got such amazing people, and the world must see that, must experience that, must celebrate it, must dance it, must sing it, must be it.
Lovely, lovely, lovely one. I'm just going to allow us to listen in on your favorite pick. The first one is going to be Sweet Freedom by Jennifer Ferguson. Please do. Letsoalo, and of course our lovely guest, Prof. Terry, joining us on our show in the Spotlight on 576 AM and channel 870 on DSTV. We were just listening to Prof. Terry giving us, such a lovely breakdown of what those two songs, Sweet Freedom by Jennifer Ferguson and Jerusalem, which we're going to be playing on later, and what it means to her. I think she gave such a beautiful breakdown, and she's been telling us also about her early life. So, Prof. Terry, I know that you were involved, as a teenager almost in KZN. Now I want us to skip to your very first job. So after you've qualified as a social worker, I'm assuming that you sort of took this route of being a social worker because of what you had been doing previously.
Yeah, I think that's a good insight, Alice. I think it did give me a feeling of being in community and of walking the streets with people that are marginalized and that are oppressed. So it was a natural follow on from what I was doing as a teenager.
Yeah. So can you just tell me a little bit more about your involvement? So I know that you then, your very first job at Saint Philomena Home for Girls. So can you just tell me about your involvement? What was it like at this home, and all of the things that you implemented at that time?
So for me, there's a lot of pathos when I think back to the work with the young women at St. Philomena's, because a lot of the children there were not put there by the state because the parents were not caring for them adequately and because their needs were not met. They were placed there because they were mixed race, and they actually were not allowed to be with their Italian father and a Zulu-speaking mother, and that's the only reason why they were removed. So it was very painful to be part of an oppressive system. So that is still a pain for me, that there's a lot of trauma in our people, unnecessarily unnecessarily produced by the state and the inhumane laws. So that was hard. However, I worked with very excellent people Sister John Mary was there, and she really trusted me. It was my first job. I was 21, and she allowed me to be creative. At the time, there were the student uprisings in the colored community. So if we look back in 1976, it was the Soweto uprisings, and all the African children rose up and said no to Afrikaans, free Mandela, and that was part of the youth's response to the oppression and calling for a more just society. And then 4 years later, the colored kids joined that. And I remember that we went to the school and said to our girls, Sister Jomri and I said to the girls, listen, we support you. You know, if you do your activism, it's okay. We right behind you, and we've got your backs. So they didn't. So, you know, it's different if you're growing up in a home and you've got your mother's got your mother's support. But when you're in a children's home, it's a bit more precarious. So there were a lot of things that I was very strongly for the girls. I fought for their dignity. I ensured that they were respected. I didn't want them to experience being othered and pointed fingers at. So the sisters were given clothes from Germany and Europe, and so we made sure the girls were dressed beautifully and they felt pride, so they could look good and they could express their African roots and enjoy their lives as creatives. That they were very creative. So I was very conscious about them being their own persons, and I had a big program that Black is Beautiful, because a lot of colored girls would have their hair in curlers the whole time, and I mean that's a real oppressive thing. So I'd take them into the bush, and we'd go take them in the bush and get them to grow their afros and enjoy their afros, and, you know, really do all kinds of things. And Johnny Clegg was a very close friend of mine, and he was coming to do a show. And I said to him, would he mind if I invite all the girls who can speak Zulu to the show? So he gave me 100 tickets to bring the young women, but they had to own their Zulu roots. I wanted them to say, this is who I am, it's part of my identity. And so they then started actually saying, yes, no, I do speak Zulu, and they came. And so there was a lot of fun. So there was also a lot of fun. That's and the other thing, so there were lots of things that I got all my friends involved, and they worked with the young women in groups, and they would take them to the beach, and that this was a weekly occurrence where my friends would take them out. And I trained these people who wanted to be volunteers and wanted to work with them as group workers, and they did amazing things with the young women on empowerment and self-respect and dignity and confidence. And
I wasn't born in the apartheid era, but of course, you know, in my mind, and of course, being, you know, an African woman as well, I can't imagine what, you know, your support at that time for those women that you're working with and assisting, what that would have meant to them, and, you know, encouraging them to look within, and encouraging them to own and be proud of their African identity. I think is so incredibly beautiful that you were, you know, empowering them. You know, I think it's so incredible. So now, you know, still keeping with your works that you were doing, still, I think in the apartheid era, I want us to now jump to the time where you were now detained. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? How did that come about?
So there were security laws that allowed the police to do exactly what they wanted. If they thought that you were a threat to state security, they would take you away. There would be, nobody would know where you were going. Nobody would know why you were going. And so you were taken away. And that's what happened. And I was first detained at the police station in the East Joburg Jeppe police station. And then I was transferred to, it's now Johannesburg police station, but at the time it was called John Foster Square. And this could happen for as long as they want. So the minute a detainee is detained, you have the sense that you're thrown away, that nobody knows where you are, and you will rot there. So the trauma of detention sets in on the very first day of your detention. So whether your detention is 3 days, 3 months, 3 years, it is a horrific thing, because there are no boundaries to it. You know, if I was charged and they said, oh, you're going to jail for 3 years, that's fine. You know, there's a beginning and an end. So our people in this country who are detained, that suffer huge trauma, and many of our leaders suffer that trauma of terrible detention, of torture. So detention was torture, just the torture to the mind. So that was that. And then when I came out of detention, David Webster from Wits University had started a detainee parents of detainee committee, a support committee with the Colemans, and they had started that, and we kept working with detainees. David Webster did amazing things. He had the Running Shoes campaign, where we had very famous South Africans would sign their tackies, and we would take it to the detainees, so they could see that, you know, the different people that were famous in our communities here were supportive of them. There was, he would go and see all the detainees' parents and say, you know, the detention isn't an easy place. So we would have a tracksuit campaign, and every detainee was given a tracksuit so that they could be comfortable and move around. And we also fought for the halting of those detention laws. So we worked in an amazingly integrated way. You know, the needs of people for their clothing and their safety and their food was met, but also there was that political pushing to say that this is not humane, this is not good health to have people detained. So there was a monitoring of them. And so even when there were states of emergency in 1985 and 1986, and nobody was allowed to meet, we would call them tea parties, and people would come from this whole area around us, Vereniging, Sebokeng, would come in, and we would have the tea parties at the Central Methodist Church in town, and people would come. We would have hundreds of people there. We would have tea, and we would monitor. Oh, they're targeting these young people. They're targeting that group. They're targeting this space. So we would be able to understand where the repression was happening, but still actually draw people in, so we could feel community, and we could feel loved and supported and heard. So it was a very privileged experience that I had. And then we set up the detainee counseling service, where we worked with the doctors. So the office of the parent support committee would send people to the detainee, the counseling center, and there would be a doctor and there would be a counselor each afternoon, and they would see a doctor and a counselor, and we would go through the counselors would go through the what were the issues about trauma, how does trauma change a person, what you can expect. And the one thing that was important for me is if they didn't have a mother who listened, a grandmother who listened. If there wasn't one person in the family that loved them unconditionally, we insisted that they came back. But coming back for counseling wasn't easy because of the distance between Joburg Central and the townships and the unsafety of it. So, we would say if these conversations you and I are having, you must have it with your grandmother, you must have it with your mother or your aunt or your uncle, the people that love you, you must talk to them.
Yes.
And those that didn't have that, we really tried to get them to come back for counseling. Yeah.
I can't imagine what it would have been for you to have experienced your own sort of fair share of trauma as well, as someone who was detained, and then now moving into your partnership, I should say, with Dr. David Webster, and starting all of these tea parties to, assist these people who had experienced trauma as well as a result of really fighting for basic, sort of human rights. I think is so incredible that you also were able to make your own sort of contributions. So you move from that, right? So you are in the apartheid area and you are assisting all of these different people. And then now you do your master's in education. How did that come about? How did you sort of make that transition from your social works, which I think you, of course, still continue to do, that didn't stop. But what inspired your decision to now say, okay, well, I'm going to be shifting now into a different sort of new field?
So my honors was in school social work practice. So I specialized in school social work practice. Yes. And so it was actually a follow-on that was very smooth for me, because I wanted to grow intellectually. I wanted to grow conceptually. I wanted to understand, different thought, schools of thought. So it felt like a real follow-on that was smooth. And I did a sociology of education masters.
I see.
And so it was a follow-on, and I was teaching at Wits for a long time. So, teaching or educating young people has been my passion. I love young people. I love working with young people. I love their challenge of me. I love understanding how they think and extending how they think, and and helping young people to find their place in the world and to identify their gifts and their talents and their yearnings for the world to be a better place, and to help shape that. And it's a huge privilege to be in that space.
That's really lovely. So is that at the same time in your life when you became interested in what you have termed spirituality and social work, and started writing papers in that field?
Yes. So what happened there, that's a very beautiful question, Alice, because when I was teaching at Wits, the students were predominantly white.
Yes.
And then we were challenging and really challenging the apartheid laws in education, and Wits started more and more opening its doors to Black students. And it was my students who said to me, "But Terry, you talk about the whole person, but where's their spirituality?" And I thought, wow, that's such an amazing idea, and when I was educated into social work, I was taught your personal is not your professional. You can't actually go and be a Catholic or a Christian and impose that on clients. Clients must be who they are. But they were saying, hang on now, you can't talk about the whole person, and we're not talking of their spirituality. And so in actually 1990, I started exploring spirituality, and there was actually a whole body of literature in that was exploring what did that mean. And so we've got very excellent academics that have been exploring the integration of spirituality within the professions and within the practice. And it's expanded, my students expanded my understanding to include working with spirituality in our lives as professionals without being imposing and without proselytizing and without being disrespectful to the people we work with.
Oh, that's beautiful. I want us to take a bit of a breather again, and then we're going to be coming back. We're going to be listening to your other favorite pick, which was Jerusalem by Master KG and Nomcebo. Please, Prof. Terry, on In the Spotlight on Radio Veritas on 576 AM and channel 870 on DSTV. We were just having such a lovely conversation about all of the amazing works that she's been doing throughout her life. And we were just speaking about her interest on spirituality and social work. So are you able, Prof, just to give us a bit of a brief snippet about how you would define what spirituality and social work is, or what that would even look like in practice?
Yes. So if we talk about spirituality, what we're talking about is a search for meaning and purpose in our lives. And it is that search for meaning it's in the context of an ethical and value framework. And so in our case, it's the inheritance from the Catholic tradition. So so we would say that our search for meaning and our search for purpose within the context of the values that I've inherited from my religious tradition. And those would be a commitment to justice. It would be a commitment to looking into the marginalized, looking for solidarity between people, looking for community. So for you and me, we would have a very specific understanding of what that search for meaning would have given our framework. But also we understand that our spirituality grows in different ways. Some of our spirituality grows as part of our life cycle. Some other parts of our spirituality grows when we have a rupture in our lives, like a death of a child, or in the 80s, it would have been a detention of children. Why is God doing that to me? Sort of to be pushed into another understanding and growing moment in our spirituality. So it's what does spirituality do for me? What does spirituality do for me? Spirituality guides my every choice, guides my, sustains me. So my spiritual practice is meditation, and my spiritual guides are the saints and the mystics of the Middle Ages. Meister Eckhart is a very central teacher to me. He was a philosopher, he was a mystic, he actually was a Dominican. He walked from monastery to monastery to meet with people. He was an amazing person. So I get my sustenance by his teachings and by silence. I am sustained in my spirituality and my practice of silence. It gives me a sense of patience, of waiting, of openness, and of being directed by God. And so when I have insights that come into me, I'm confident that I can be led by God through those moments.
Lovely. I think it was so beautiful that you mentioned how intricately linked your spirituality really is to like the core of who you are, the kinds of decisions that you make as a person. And I love also how you just mentioned what some of your spiritual practices are. And I would like to believe that, like, as you were saying, meditation, for instance, would you say that that has been sort of consistent practice in your life that has assisted you through, you know, the most difficult of moments or even the happiest of moments in your life?
Yes, absolutely. So for me, that's I've been doing that for 30 years. My husband and I
Wow.
have meditating every morning for 30 years. And it's a touch point. It's a touch point because God is bigger than us. And
Mm-hmm.
we've learned, I mean, Alice, from the pandemic, we've learned that our lives are not actually in our control. Anything can
Yes.
happen. And
Yes.
how do we remain steady in that?
Mm.
You know, how do we
Yeah.
do that? And for me, it's sitting in that silence that holds me.
Beautiful. That is so, so beautiful. I think that's definitely a practice that I need to get into doing as well. Now that we are stepping into the new year as well, I think it's so important to just, you know, stay in the presence of God and to gain clarity, which I've heard a lot of people say comes as a result of, you know, meditating. So I thought it was super beautiful that you mentioned that as well, just as we are entering into the new year. Prof, it's been so, so lovely talking to you. You know, I wish there's so many other questions that I want to ask you, but we have so much limited time. But it is a standard practice that as we do wrap up our conversation, that you tell us what is a message that you would have to your 13-year-old self?
Yeah. So what I would say is trust God, trust yourself. Be confident. Know that you are God's precious creation. Know that you are born to contribute to the reign of God in your life. Know that whatever you do, you need to pursue truth and beauty and goodness, and your life will be fulfilled.
Wow, that is such incredible words to end what I think has been an incredible show. Thank you so, so much, Prof, for not only joining us, but for dropping all of those pearls of wisdom and also inspiring us as well to stand in your truth, to live out your purpose, to trust yourself, and all of the amazing things that we've learned about your journey. I think it's been so beautiful and lovely just chatting to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alice, and you've been my blessing. Thank you, and may your 2023 be rich for you, and be proud of yourself because you're a wonderful young woman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Such lovely words
Thanks.
from you. Thank you so much, Prof. It's been so, so beautiful having such a beautiful program. The next program that you're going to be listening to is Divine Mercy Prayer and Hymns. But from me, your girl Alice, it's goodbye, everyone.